ready to uncover the real story of the Library of Alexandria.
Right.
And not just the myths and legends, but like the actual history.
I'm ready.
Awesome. So we're diving into this fascinating Wikipedia article, all in Spanish, about this legendary place. And one thing that might surprise people right off the bat is that the Library of Alexandria, it wasn't the first of its kind.
Yeah, that's a really good point. We often think of the Library of Alexandria as a sort of like unique, singular marvel.
Right.
But it's important to understand it was actually part of this much larger trend.
Okay, so set the scene for us. Like what came before?
Hmm?
What was the world like before the Library of Alexandria came along? What were some of the precursors to this legendary institution?
Well, imagine going back centuries before Alexandria even existed to places like Assyria and Babylon.
Okay.
These ancient civilizations had vast archives filled with clay tablets and cuneiform script.
Wow.
Think of the Library of Ashurbanipal in Nineveh, for example. King Ashurbanipal was obsessed with collecting texts, and his library held tens of thousands of clay tablets covering everything from literature and history to medicine and magic.
Wow, a king with a thirst for knowledge.
Yeah.
That's pretty impressive for its time. But how did we get from clay tablets to the Library of Alexandria? How did that tradition evolve?
Even in ancient Greece, you had hints of public libraries, particularly in Athens.
Okay.
But things really shifted with Alexander the Great and the dynasty that ruled Egypt after him, the Ptolemies. They were all about spreading Greek culture.
Right.
And a big part of that was gathering knowledge from the people they conquered.
So it wasn't just about books, it was about power too.
Exactly.
Using knowledge to kind of solidify their rule.
Exactly. It was a way for the Ptolemies to legitimize their power and portray themselves as the true heirs to Alexander's legacy.
Hmm.
And what better way to do that than by creating the greatest library the world had ever seen?
Okay. Speaking of power plays, didn't they bring in some big names to help with this ambitious project? I'm thinking of Demetrius of Phalerum. Wasn't he an exiled Athenian scholar who had some connection to Aristotle?
Demetrius was a student of Aristotle.
Wow.
And his story is crucial to understanding the library's early years. He may have been the founding spirit, so to speak. It's believed that he played a key role in acquiring Aristotle's writings for the library early on. Imagine having access to those texts in their original form.
Now, that's what I call a valuable acquisition. Okay, so we have this ambitious dynasty, the Ptolemies. They want to build this grand library. But what did it actually look like? I think a lot of people imagine one giant building
Right.
going up in flames.
Yeah.
But our sources paint a different picture, right?
Yeah, that dramatic image of a single building burning down, it's a common misconception. The library was actually a part of the royal palace complex in Alexandria, known as the Bruchion.
Okay.
Think a less single building and more like a modern university campus.
A university campus in ancient Egypt. That's not what I was expecting.
It might sound surprising, but the sources describe gardens, dining halls, lecture spaces, all existing alongside the scrolls. It was this vibrant intellectual hub, a place where scholars from all over the Mediterranean world could come together to study, debate, and exchange ideas.
And there's this intriguing detail from the Wikipedia article you sent, which I think really gets at the heart of what this place meant to people. It mentions an inscription, the place of the soul's healing. What does that tell us about how they viewed knowledge?
That inscription speaks volumes about their view of knowledge. It wasn't just about storing information.
Right.
It was about nurturing the mind and spirit. Knowledge was seen as a source of healing,
Interesting.
a way to elevate yourself and connect with something larger.
So not just a library,
Yeah,
but a sanctuary for the intellect. That's a powerful concept.
it is.
And to really understand that concept, we need to talk about the Museum. I'm guessing that's where we get the word museum from.
You got it. But the ancient Museum was much more than just a place to display artifacts. It was a community of scholars.
A state-sponsored think tank where brilliant minds from all over the world were paid by the Ptolemies to just think and write.
Okay, now that sounds like my kind of place. So who are some of these superstar scholars hanging out at the Mario?
Oh, there were so many.
Give us some highlights.
Well, you had Zenodotus, who did early work on Homer's poems.
Okay.
And you know what? He may have invented alphabetical order.
Wait, alphabetical order, like the ABCs we all know and love?
Yeah.
That's huge.
Yeah, it is. It is a foundational element of how we organize information even today.
Wow.
Then there was Callimachus, who created the Pinaikes, basically the world's first library catalog.
So they were already thinking about organization and information retrieval
Oh, boy.
back then? That's pretty forward thinking.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And let's not forget Eratosthenes, who calculated the Earth's circumference with incredible accuracy for his time. These were groundbreaking thinkers working in a truly unique environment. It makes you wonder what other incredible discoveries and ideas were born within those walls.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we even have accounts suggesting that figures like Archimedes and Euclid might have spent time in Alexandria.
I know.
Can you imagine the kinds of conversations those minds must have had?
It's mind-boggling to think about the intellectual energy that must have been buzzing around the Library of Alexandria.
Yeah.
You know, this wasn't just about the books themselves. It was about the people, the ideas, the exchange of knowledge that was happening there. And that's what made it truly special. It really is. And speaking of those books, you know, the Ptolemies were so determined to build this massive collection that they weren't exactly playing nice with others.
Ooh, sounds like some library dramas about to unfold. What were they up to?
Well, their aggressive pursuit of scrolls actually sparked a bit of a rivalry
Okay.
with another kingdom, Pergamum, in what's now modern-day Turkey. The Attalid kings of Pergamum, they saw the Library of Alexandria as a model, and they decided to create their own grand institution.
So instead of admiring from afar, Pergamum decided to kind of enter the ring. Was this a straight-up copycat library?
Yeah.
Or did they have their own unique flavor?
They definitely brought their own innovations to the table. Remember how we talked about how the Ptolemies' obsession with scrolls created a papyrus shortage?
Right. It's like they cornered the market
Yeah.
on ancient paper.
Well, Pergamum had to get creative. They perfected the production of parchment, which was made from animal skins and more readily available.
Okay.
And it was actually more durable and easier to write on than papyrus.
So in a way, the Library of Alexandria's success helped its rival flourish. That's pretty ironic.
It is. But the rivalry went beyond just materials. Pergamum also thought to attract top scholars and build a reputation for intellectual excellence. They wanted to be the place for cutting-edge research and thinking.
Did they manage to steal Alexandria's thunder?
Yeah.
How big did the Library of Pergamum actually get?
They amassed a collection of around 200,000 scrolls, making it a major center of scholarship in its own right. While the names of many Pergamum scholars have been lost to time, we know that they made significant contributions to fields like grammar, literature, and mathematics.
So it wasn't just competition, it was a flourishing of knowledge across the ancient world, two great libraries pushing each other to be better.
Exactly. Now, there's this story that Mark Antony gave the entire collection of the Library of Pergamum to Cleopatra as a gift.
Wow.
It may be more legend than fact, but even the idea that someone would gift an entire library speaks volumes about the value placed on knowledge in the ancient world.
It really does. Okay, so we've talked about libraries in Alexandria, libraries in Pergamum. What other hidden library treasures are out there?
Our next stop takes us to a place buried by the eruption of Mount Vesuvius in 79 AD, Herculaneum. Remember, it was a Roman town, much like Pompeii, frozen in time by volcanic ash.
Okay, so amidst the tragedy and destruction, what's so special about Herculaneum in terms of libraries?
There, among the ruins, archaeologists uncovered something remarkable. A luxurious villa believed to have belonged to Julius Caesar's father-in-law.
Okay.
And inside this villa, they found a library, unlike any other the villa of the papyri, filled with hundreds of scrolls.
Hold on, weren't those scrolls incredibly fragile? How did they possibly survive a volcanic eruption?
That's the amazing part. The intense heat from Vesuvius carbonized the scrolls, turning them into charcoal. They were essentially baked, but not burned to ash.
Wow, so they were preserved by the very force that destroyed the city around them.
Yeah.
That's incredible. What have we learned from these scrolls? What kind of knowledge did they contain?
The majority of the scrolls found so far focus on philosophy, especially works by the Epicurean school of thought. They believed in seeking pleasure and avoiding pain, but not in a hedonistic way. More about moderation, tranquility, living in harmony with nature.
So not exactly your typical action-packed Roman literature.
No.
More about finding inner peace, it sounds like.
Exactly. The Villa of the Papyri gives us this fascinating window into the intellectual life of a wealthy Roman in the 1st century AD.
Right.
And it makes you wonder what other philosophical treasures are still buried out there, waiting to be discovered.
It really does. But let's shift gears for a moment and talk about the impact of these ancient libraries.
Mm-hmm.
They weren't just storehouses of knowledge, right?
Right.
They were also centers of scholarship and innovation where new ideas were born.
Absolutely. Think back to the scholars we talked about at the Library of Alexandria, Xenodotus, Callimachus, Eratosthenes. They weren't just librarians, they were active researchers pushing the boundaries of knowledge.
You're right. Xenodotus standardizing Homer's poems, essentially shaping Western literature as we know it. Callimachus creating the Panakes, an early attempt to grapple with the challenges of organizing vast amounts of information. And then Eratosthenes calculating the Earth's circumference
It's amazing.
with incredible accuracy.
Exactly. These individuals and the institutions they worked in had a profound impact on how we understand the world, even today.
So how did these ancient libraries shape the development of scholarship as we know it? What were their lasting contributions?
One of their most important legacies was the development of the critical edition. It's basically a scholarly edition of a text that tries to present the most accurate and authentic version possible.
Okay.
To do this, scholars compare different manuscripts, analyze variations, and make informed decisions about the most reliable readings.
So it's not just about copying a text.
Right.
It's about really digging deep and understanding it, figuring out its most authentic form.
Exactly.
And this practice is still the foundation of scholarship today.
Exactly. And ancient libraries also pioneered the concept of commentaries, those footnotes and annotations we see in scholarly works. Back then, scholars would write extensive commentaries on important texts, explaining difficult passages, offering interpretations, even drawing connections to other works.
It sounds like a very early version of peer review.
You could say that. These commentaries were a way for scholars to engage with each other's ideas and build on existing knowledge. And that tradition of critical analysis and scholarly dialogue is something we've inherited directly from those ancient libraries.
So even though these libraries are long gone,
Right.
their influence continues to shape how we think, learn, and create knowledge.
Absolutely. And that brings us to a very important question. What exactly was lost when these ancient libraries declined?
Right.
I imagine it's impossible to know for sure.
It really is one of the biggest mysteries in history, isn't it?
Yeah.
We know countless scrolls vanished, but the knowledge they contained is lost to us.
One of the most heartbreaking losses is the poetry of Sappho, an ancient Greek poet renowned for her passionate love poems.
Oh, wow.
We only have a few fragments of her work, just hints of her incredible talent.
Such a loss. And I imagine there were countless other works by lesser-known authors that we'll never even know existed.
Exactly. But even in the face of this loss, there's a glimmer of hope. The fact that we're still talking about these ancient libraries, still trying to piece together their history and uncover their secrets, is a testament to the enduring power of knowledge.
We may have lost some battles, but the quest for knowledge goes on.
Precisely. And the Library of Alexandria, even in its absence, inspires us to keep seeking, preserving, and sharing knowledge.
Speaking of seeking knowledge, let's talk about this idea of universal knowledge.
Yeah.
The ambition to gather all the world's knowledge in one place.
Mm-hmm.
It was a bold vision, and it's one that still resonates today.
It does. But it also raises some important questions. What does universal knowledge really mean?
Right.
Is such a thing even possible?
Those are great questions. What are your thoughts?
Well, for starters, the very idea of universal knowledge is shaped by the culture that envisions it.
Okay.
The ancient Greeks, and especially the Ptolemies, saw themselves as heirs to a superior intellectual tradition. Their idea of universal knowledge was really more about Greek knowledge.
So there was a bias built into their collection, a limited perspective.
It's inevitable. Every library reflects the values and perspectives of its creators.
Which makes you wonder, what would a truly universal library look like?
Yeah.
If such a thing were even possible.
It's a fascinating thought experiment. Would it include every language, every culture, every perspective? How would you even begin to organize such a vast and diverse collection?
It's mind-boggling.
It is.
And what about knowledge considered dangerous or harmful?
Yeah.
Where do you draw the line?
Yeah, you're getting into some really complex issues there. Censorship, access, the power dynamics of knowledge.
Right.
These are questions societies have grappled with for centuries.
And they're even more relevant today in the age of the internet
Exactly.
and information overload.
Exactly. The Library of Alexandria may be ancient history, but the questions it raises about knowledge, power, and access are still very much alive today.
Okay, so we've explored the rise and fall of these ancient libraries, the scholars who worked there, the tragic losses we've suffered, and the enduring questions they raise.
But there's one more fascinating aspect we need to explore: the crucial role of translation in the ancient world.
Ah, yes. Translation, the unsung hero of intellectual history.
Yes.
We take it for granted now, but Back then, translating texts from different cultures and time periods
Right.
was a complex and challenging task.
Absolutely. There were different schools of thought on how to approach translation. Some favored a literal approach, sticking as closely as possible to the original text, word for word. This could sometimes lead to awkward and clunky prose, though.
Right, trying to force one language into the structure of another.
Exactly. Other translators took a more liberal approach, focusing on conveying the meaning and spirit of the original, even if it meant deviating from the exact wording. It was more like adaptation than direct translation.
So which approach was right?
That's a debate that continues even today. But in the context of ancient libraries, translation was absolutely essential. Remember, the Ptolemies wanted all the world's knowledge, but that knowledge was written in countless languages.
So they needed an army of skilled translators to make those texts accessible
Yeah.
to Greek-speaking scholars.
Hmm.
Do we know anything about those translators?
Sadly, most of their names are lost to history. But we can imagine the challenges they faced working with scrolls from distant lands, deciphering unfamiliar scripts, wrestling with complex ideas in languages vastly different from their own.
It sounds like incredibly challenging, but also deeply rewarding work.
Absolutely. Their contributions were invaluable. They were the bridge builders of the ancient intellectual world, expanding the horizons of knowledge through their dedicated efforts.
It makes you appreciate the effort that goes into translating a book, bringing it to a new audience.
It really does, and it reminds us that the legacy of these ancient libraries extends far beyond their physical walls. It's a legacy that lives on in the ideas we inherit, the texts we study, and the very way we approach knowledge and scholarship.
What a powerful thought. So as we wrap up this part of our deep dive, what's the key takeaway? What do you hope our listener will walk away with?
The Library of Alexandria wasn't just a building. It was a symbol of human ambition, our endless curiosity and pursuit of knowledge. And its story, along with those of Pergamum and Herculaneum, reminds us that even in the face of loss and destruction, the human spirit's thirst for knowledge endures.
And that thirst is something worth celebrating and nurturing, both in ourselves and in future generations. Okay, before we move on to our final stop, let's recap what we've learned so far. We've traveled from Alexandria to Pergamum, from ancient Greece to Rome and Herculaneum, unearthing fascinating insights into the world of ancient libraries.
We've explored the challenges of preserving knowledge, the art of translation, and the complexities of seeking universal knowledge.
And we've encountered some truly remarkable individuals.
Yes.
Scholars, librarians, and translators who dedicated their lives to the pursuit and transmission of knowledge across time and cultures. Okay, so it's been quite a journey, but we're not done yet. For our final stop, we're going to fast forward a few centuries
Right.
and see how this story of libraries continues into the Middle Ages.
Yeah, we're moving from the world of scrolls and ancient cities to the realm of monasteries and illuminated manuscripts. After the fall of the Roman Empire, Europe went through this period of just great upheaval.
Yeah,
But amidst all the chaos, monasteries became these vital centers of learning.
so the monks were like the librarians
Yeah.
of the Dark Ages, keeping the flame of knowledge alive.
They played a crucial role. They copied ancient texts by hand, painstakingly preserving classical literature and philosophical works that might otherwise have been lost forever. They also developed new ways of making and organizing books.
It's mind-blowing to think that those fragile manuscripts survived all those years tucked away in monasteries.
Yeah, it really is a testament to the dedication and skill of the medieval scribes.
Right.
They saw themselves as guardians of knowledge and they took their work very seriously. They weren't just copying words, they were preserving entire worlds of thought.
Were there any particular libraries or monasteries that stand out as kind of major players in this preservation effort?
Oh, absolutely. One of the most famous examples is the library at the Abbey of Cluny in France.
Okay.
At its peak, it was one of the largest and most influential libraries in all of Europe.
Wow, the medieval equivalent
Yeah.
of a library superstar. What kinds of texts were they collecting at Cluny? Was it all religious stuff, or did they have a broader range?
Oh, they cast a wide net. Their collection included works of theology, philosophy, history, literature, and even copies of ancient Greek and Roman texts that had been lost in the West for centuries.
So the monks at Cluny were kind of rediscovering the classics,
Yeah.
reintroducing ancient knowledge to a world that had almost forgotten it.
Precisely. They were rebuilding the intellectual foundations of Europe, brick by book.
That's amazing. Did they keep all this knowledge locked away in their monasteries, or did they share it with the wider world?
Right.
Were they lending books and exchanging ideas?
While some monasteries were more protective of their collections than others, there was definitely a circulation of knowledge happening. Books were traded, borrowed, copied, and new ideas spread through scholarly networks.
So those ancient texts were traveling across time and space,
Yeah.
influencing generations of thinkers. It's fascinating to think about that interconnectedness.
It is. It's a powerful reminder that the history of knowledge isn't linear.
Right.
It's a story of rediscovery, reinterpretation, and transformation, with each generation adding its own layer to the tapestry of ideas.
Speaking of transformation, how did medieval libraries change the way we think about books and knowledge? Did they bring anything new to the table besides just preserving old stuff?
Oh, they made some groundbreaking innovations. One of their most important contributions was the introduction of the codex.
The codex. Isn't that just a fancy word for book?
Yeah, it is what we call a book today, but back then it was a revolutionary development. Remember how ancient libraries relied on scrolls? Those
Wow.
long, unwieldy rolls of papyrus or parchment?
Right. Not exactly the most user-friendly format.
Exactly. But the codex was a bound book with pages that could be turned.
Okay.
It was more compact, easier to handle, and allowed for random access to information.
Right.
You could flip to a specific page instead of having to unroll an entire scroll to find what you were looking for.
So much more convenient.
Yeah,
It sounds like the codex really democratized access to knowledge in a way.
absolutely. It made information more readily available and paved the way for the mass production of books later on during the Renaissance. The Humble Codex, a medieval invention, had a profound impact on the world.
That's incredible. Did medieval libraries make any other advancements in terms of organization and knowledge management?
They certainly did. Remember how we talked about Callimachus and his Pintice, that early attempt at a library catalog?
Right.
Well, medieval librarians took those ideas even further. They developed more sophisticated systems for classifying and organizing books, often based on subject matter. These systems were the forerunners of the modern library classification systems we use today.
So these monks weren't just preserving knowledge, they were also figuring out how to make it more accessible
Yeah,
and usable. They were pioneers of library science.
exactly. Their work laid the groundwork for the great libraries of the Renaissance and the Enlightenment, and ultimately for the libraries we use and love today.
We've covered so much ground in this deep dive.
We have.
From ancient Alexandria to medieval monasteries, it's been an amazing journey through the history of libraries.
It really has. And throughout this journey, one theme keeps emerging: the enduring human desire to collect, preserve, and share knowledge. That desire transcends time and place, cultures and civilizations. It's what connects us to those ancient scholars, those dedicated scribes, those book-loving monks who came before us.
We're all part of this grand, ongoing conversation about the world and our place in it.
Yeah,
And that's something worth cherishing, isn't it?
absolutely. The Library of Alexandria may be a distant memory, but its legacy lives on in every library, every book, every act of learning and discovery.
So as we wrap up our exploration, let's carry that inspiration with us.
Yeah.
Let's stay curious, let's never stop seeking knowledge, and let's always be willing to share what we learn with others.
Beautifully said. The story of knowledge is our story, and that story continues with each new generation. So keep exploring, keep learning, and keep diving deep into the world of ideas. Until next time.